Welcome to our Friday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today is the end of my teaching that I've been doing for 4 weeks on how to stay full of God. I know that title, this is a little strange and it kind of puts people off, but this is a powerful teaching. It's something that is a really a mainstay in my relationship with the Lord. And today is my last day to teach on that, so it's the last day I'll be offering this product. I've got this 200-page book entitled Discover the Keys to Staying Full of God. I've got this little booklet that is a 50-page summary of this larger book. We're offering the book for a donation of any amount. We are offering this little booklet as free gift to you, and then we've got CDs, DVDs, a USB, and a study guide. A lot of material. We'll be giving out the information at the end of our program. And remember, today is our last day to make this offer over television. I've got a lot of things I want to share today, and I just hadn't got a time to go back through everything I've been saying, but it's really important. And I would encourage you to please get hold of this. You know, if you want to, you can go to our website and you can actually download all of these television programs free of charge or listen to them on our website. You can get this material at absolutely no charge. There's no reason for you not to do it. I'm making it as available to you as I possibly can. And I would really encourage you to take advantage of it. So I've been teaching this week about the fourth thing that happens that blocks the flow of God to a person or through a person. And that last thing is that their foolish heart becomes darkened. This is out of Romans chapter 1, verse 21. It says the first thing is they don't glorify Him as God. The second thing is they aren't thankful. The third thing is their imagination becomes vain, and then that causes their foolish heart to become darkened or insensitive to God. And I've been talking about how you can reverse this process. And one of the things that I've been saying is that it's never God who quits giving His blessing, joy, peace, and everything. It's us that quits receiving because our attention gets put on other things and all of these kind of things. So actually, I was using Abraham as an example, that Abraham isn't a person who had more than we had. He had less than we had, less unbelief. It says he considered not his own body now dead. The problem with us is we do consider ourselves and our inability and our weaknesses. But Abraham, he was just focused on the promise of God. So shall your seed be. And because of that, he was focused on that, and he didn't look to the right or to the left. He didn't take into account what everybody else had to say. So let me give you another example of this. This is out of the 17th chapter of the book of Matthew, and this is where Jesus and 3 of His disciples had just been up on this mountain, and He was transfigured before them. Moses and Elijah came and talked with Him, and then a glory cloud came over them, and they heard an audible voice of God. They had just had this mountaintop experience. They came down, and there was a man who had brought his son to the remaining disciples. There were still 9 disciples that were at the bottom of this mountain, and he brought his son to get the demon cast out. I'm using the King James, and the King James said he was lunatic. This isn't necessarily talking about that he was out of his mind. It means that he had seizures. And if you read this same thing over, and I believe it's Luke chapter 9, it is that when the boy was brought to Jesus, he had a seizure and fell on the ground. And the father said that sometimes he falls into the water and sometimes into the fire. So it was describing some type of thing like what we would call epilepsy or some type of a seizure. And the disciples could not cast the demon out. So Jesus did it for them. And after the crowd had left and after this whole thing was over, they came to Him. And here in Matthew chapter 17, and in verse 19, it says, Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, Why could not we cast him out? And you know, this is an excellent question, because there's many people today that don't believe that miracles happen. They don't believe that there are demons, or if there are, they are all in some village in Africa someplace. It's certainly in these developed countries, there aren't demons. I'm not sure that there aren't more demons in our developed country than there are in some of these African villages. But anyway, if they would have believed that there aren't demons or that we don't have a power to do that miracles don't happen today like so many religious people believe. If that's what they were believing, they wouldn't have had this question. But they did believe they could cast out demons, and if you were to turn back to the 10th chapter of the book of Matthew, you'll find out that they had already gone out and had cast demons out, and they came back saying, Lord, even the demons are subject unto us. And they didn't have a single question about why didn't it work every time. So by the virtue of the fact that they didn't have a question about it, it's implied that they had seen demons cast out and they had seen it work every time. But this time, they didn't see the proper results. Jesus had to do it for them, and they're saying, why didn't it work? Sometimes people who believe in the miraculous power of God have more questions than the religious people that don't believe that miracles happen today, because they aren't expecting anything, so they're never disappointed. But if you are expecting to walk in the supernatural power of God, it can wind up causing more problems or more questions on the inside of you than people that don't believe that we can live a miraculous life today. So they asked this question, why couldn't we cast him out? And in verse 20, Jesus answered and said unto them, because of your unbelief. You know, I am not a King James only guy. I use other translations. I use the NIV, the Amplified, Young's, just all kinds of stuff. I look at all kinds of translations. So I am not a King James only guy, but I do believe the King James is the most accurate. And some people just can't figure out that thou means you. That's too big of a step for them. It's not a problem with me. I was raised on it. So anyway, I'm not criticizing other people, but I am saying that I believe the King James is the best. And I just want to point out that if you're using the NIV, it says here that the reason they couldn't cast it out, he said it's because of your little faith. And that is absolutely wrong. And you can tell it's wrong because the rest of the verse goes on to say, for verily I say unto you, if you have faith of grain of mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. If it was like the NIV said that it's your little faith that's the problem, then the rest of this verse wouldn't make sense, because he talks about if your faith is as little, as small as a grain of mustard seed, that's more than enough to see a mountain cast into the sea. So the problem wasn't little faith, the problem was unbelief. And let me just say while I'm talking about this, that verse 21 where it says, howbeit this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting, that's not even in the NIV. They just chose to take that verse out of the Bible. There's 6 places that I can show you that the NIV just took the scriptures out. They didn't think enough of it to even put the scriptures in there. I don't know what the logic for that is, but that is wrong, wrong, wrong. Verse 21 is absolutely essential to understand what he's saying. And in verse 20, it's unbelief is the problem, not little faith. You miss the whole thing of what he's saying if you interpret it the way the NIV had this done. So if you've got the NIV, you ought to get yourself a whole Bible, one that will translate it accurately, and use that. And so he says, what's the problem? He says, it's your unbelief. So here's a point. I've touched on this before when I was talking about Abraham. It's not that Abraham had more than we had. We've got more than Abraham had. I've already quoted this, but over in Matthew chapter 11, Jesus was talking about John the Baptist, saying John the Baptist was the greatest among any person who had ever lived. That makes him greater than Moses, Elijah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Hosea, anybody. You name anybody. John the Baptist was greater than them, but it goes on to say, nevertheless, he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. If you think you are the least Christian today, you're greater than Moses, Elijah, Daniel, Hosea, anybody. Man, that is a huge statement. So we've got more. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 says that what we have makes what the Old Testament people had have no glory in comparison. What we've got is so glorious it makes them look like what they've got is nothing in comparison. You have the fullness of the Godhead dwelling on the inside of you bodily if you've been born again. You've got faith that Moses would have loved to have had. and it's resident on the inside of you. It's not something that comes and goes. It says in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23, that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. Faith is a product, a fruit of your spirit, and there is no dormant season in the spiritual realm. All of the time, you've got the supernatural, God kind of faith on the inside of you. You don't have a lack of faith. The problem is, just as Jesus described here, you got an unbelief problem. And this relates back to everything I've said about Abraham this last week over in Romans chapter 4. The reason he was strong in faith was because he didn't consider anything that was contrary to the promise that God had given him. The reason most of us are weak in faith is because we do consider all of these other things. We are plugged into the carnal, ungodly thinking, the unbelief of this world in ways that no group of Christians have ever been plugged into the world. Because of our communication today, we pay big bucks to have unbelief piped into our phones, and we sit there, and I've read things that the average American spends 4 to 5 hours a day on the phone, and I can guarantee you aren't doing something constructive. You're looking at all of the negative reports, all of the evil things that are happening all over the world. There's a place for that to a degree, but not for you to spend 4 or 5 hours a day on your phone or watching television, listening to all of the ungodliness and the bad news that's coming out, and then you counter that with a 15-minute devotion. It's not going to work. We are just being overwhelmed with unbelief. So the Lord was telling His disciples, look, you guys, you had faith. You've used your faith before. You've cast demons out before. But this time, it was your unbelief that negated your faith. And this is a thought that a lot of people have never had. They think that if you're operating in faith, you automatically have no unbelief. Or if you have any unbelief, you automatically don't have any faith. They see them as opposites that cannot exist together. But you can have faith and unbelief at the same time. That's the reason that in Mark chapter 5, when Jairus' disciples came and said, don't trouble the master anymore, your daughter's already dead. Jesus turned and said, fear not, only believe. Why did He say only believe? Because you can believe and disbelieve at the same time. You can have faith and unbelief at the same time. And they're counterbalancing forces. They oppose each other. You can dilute your faith by having unbelief over here. So instead of trying to just increase your faith and get to where you have this huge amount of faith, all you need is a little faith. A mustard seed amount of faith is enough to cast a mountain into the sea by just talking to it if you don't have any unbelief that opposes it. So there's different types of unbelief. It says in the next verse, this verse that doesn't even exist in the NIV Bible, it says, howbeit this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. People have interpreted that's talking about this kind of demon only goes out through prayer and fasting. That's not accurate. There is no demon that you have to add prayer and fasting to faith in the name of Jesus to get rid of it. If faith in Jesus isn't enough to get rid of a demon, well, then your prayer and fasting is not going to do it either. Prayer and fasting doesn't affect demons. What it does is affect your type of unbelief. That's what the subject of the 20th verse was. Why couldn't we cast him out? Because of your unbelief. And this kind of unbelief only goes out through prayer and fasting. You know what prayer and fasting does? If you do it correctly, now you can pray religiously, you can fast religiously. There's people in other, religions that fast. And if you do it just as a physical thing, all you're going to do is get hungry. But if you do fasting correctly, fasting isn't only a withdrawal from food, but it's a replacing the focus that you would have had on food. You're replacing it by focusing on God. Or as Jesus said, man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So instead of you getting nourishment from food, You are turning from that food and you're filling that time with being focused on God. If all you're doing is going without eating and you're doing your normal daily activities, I'm not saying that there's no benefit to that, but you're diminishing the benefit. Isaiah chapter 58 tells you about what a godly fast is like, and it's a day for you to withdraw yourself from all of the things that you normally do, and you just shut yourself up and you focus on God. Here's why fasting and prayer affects this type of unbelief. Because I hadn't got time. My last program, but in my estimation, there's 3 major types of unbelief. I'm not even got time to tell you what they are, but the last one is just a natural unbelief that comes when you see something contrary to what you're believing for. There's just a natural thought of unbelief. If you pray for somebody to be healed and if they fall over dead, there's naturally going to be a thought, it didn't work. And that's not demonic. That's not wrong teaching. That's not ignorance. It's just the fact that what you're seeing doesn't match up with what you're believing. You're going to naturally have some thoughts of unbelief. How do you get rid of that kind of unbelief? This is what fasting and prayer does. Because when you are praying, if you're doing it correctly, you're talking to someone that you can't see, and you're also hearing them talk back to you, which you can't hear with your physical ears, but you're hearing it with your heart. And what you're doing, you're training your body, your senses, your 5 senses, that there's more than just what you can see, taste, hear, smell, and feel. There's also the unseen realm. It says in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14, that strong meat belongs to those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. It says that you have to exercise yourself to discern spiritual things. And one of the ways you exercise yourself is when you pray to a God that you can't see, and then you hear a God that you can't hear with just your physical ears. You're training your 5 senses that there's more than just 5 senses. There's a 6th sense, faith, that you can reach into unseen realm. You can communicate with a God who can't be seen or felt physically, but He can be seen with your heart, and you can feel Him in your heart. You're training your senses. You're exercising them to discern that there's more than just this natural realm. And the same thing happens, with fasting. Did you know that our 5 senses, what you can see, taste, hear, smell, and feel, probably the easiest to aggravate, the quickest to rebel is your appetite. Because there's a lot of people, there's people watching this program that you've never gone more than just a few hours without food in your life. If you were to miss a meal, you start getting cranky, irritable, gripey. You start having headaches. You feel weak and flush and all kinds of things. Your body is addicted to food. Now, we all need to eat. I'm not saying that we don't eat, but you don't need to eat 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day the way some people do. Matter of fact, the medical profession will actually say fasting 1 day a week is actually good for you. It purges your body of all kinds of toxins. You do not die by noon the first day if you go on a fast. Your body will tell you that you are, but you know what? If you just determine, no, your body says, I'm hungry, feed me or I'm going to die. You say, no, we're going all day without any food. Your body will rebel. I'll never make it. I'll be dead by sundown. Truth is, you won't. You won't die if you go 1 day without food. And so you start bringing your body into subjection to your spirit man and saying, look, I'm not going to live by bread alone. I'm going to focus my attention on God. The Word of God is going to sustain me. And your body will rebel and say, I'll be dead by sundown. So you say, all right, we'll go 2 days. And your body will say, I'll never make it 2 days. You'll say, we go 3 days. And your body's going to learn that if it's going to survive this thing, it better shut up and submit. And did you know after you fasted for a brief period of time, you can actually get to a place to where your hunger just leaves. You get to where you don't even feel hunger anymore. It's like you could go forever without eating. Of course, that's not true. Over 40 days, your body literally begins to die if you go over 40 days on a fast. But you start bringing your body into subjection, and then when God starts speaking to you and you're now focused on the Lord in a way that you weren't, because you were so occupied with just this affairs of this life, not only eating, but your work and everything else. You just separate yourself. You focus on God. You start hearing. God starts speaking. Miracles start happening. Your body gets healed. Things happen. And you've just trained. You've exercised your senses to discern that there's more than just this physical realm. So then, when you pray for something like a demon to come out of this boy, and instead of it looking better, he falls on the ground and wallows and foams at the mouth, you've already exercised yourself that, hey, there's more than what I can see. And you can continue to stand in faith and let your little mustard seed amount of faith work, and you discount this unbelief. But if you have never told your body, that body, you get in line. Your feelings, you get in line. Thoughts, you get in line. You follow what I'm saying. Instead, I'm not going to go by what I see. If you've never fasted and prayed like what I've been describing, and you say, body, in the name of Jesus, I don't care what you feel, you're healed. Your body's going to say, pardon me, when's the last time you ever told me anything? I tell you what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat. You haven't ever given me any instruction. Your body will rebel, and those 5 senses will be more moved by what you're seeing than what you are by believing. But if you fast and pray, it will cast out this kind of unbelief. It will get to where your senses know that there's more to it than just the physical realm. You know, I've seen my son raised from the dead. I've seen my wife raised from the dead. I've seen God supply financial miracles. I've seen people's lives changed. I've used my faith, and I have trained my 5 senses that there's things going on in the unseen realm out there and in me that I can't see or feel. And so when I don't see the results that I'm wanting, it's easy for me just to default and say, oh, well, it's, happening in the unseen realm. In due season, I'll see if I faint not. And I can continue in my faith and just let my little mustard seed amount of faith produce the results. But people that have never spent time praying and never spent time fasting, they'll try and bring their body into subjection, and it'll rebel because you don't ever control your body. Your body controls you. Hello, this is Andrew Wommack, and if you've enjoyed our program there on YouTube, I encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share this with other people because, man, these truths will set people free. So check it out, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.